Welcome back to EDH on a Budget. I'm your host Iceman. Today we're going to be going over 6 different win cons. First up, we have a colorless option called Graz Unstoppable Juggernaut for 8 mana. Is the cost. This is a legendary artifact creature, Juggernaut. It's the type of creatures for 7/5 stats. It has Juggernauts you control attack each combat if able. Juggernauts you control can't be blocked by walls. Other creatures you control have base power and toughness 5/3 and are Juggernauts in addition to their other types. So you're going to want a really wide board because with tokens or anything, but it's pretty easy to make a wide board of tokens. You can easily cast an X spell that creates X11s or X22s. It doesn't really matter how powerful they are because when this card's on the battlefield, they're going to turn into 5/3s. And if you have enough of them, it's just going to overwhelm them, and when you start dealing 5 damage per creature, it adds up fast. The risk is that if this creature dies, their increased power and toughness will also go away. So while I don't recommend him as a commander, it can be a good way to just sneak in surprise lethal on players when you see that they're tapped out. Next up we have Graz is 13 cents. Next up we have Return of the Wild Speaker for 79 cents. This card is an instant that costs 4 and a green. This is one of my favorites because it is flexible. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. Or non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. I've definitely used this card to finish out games because since it's an instant, you can cast this after blockers are declared. So if your creatures are unblocked, and you have enough non-humans, you play this, pump up all those non-humans by 3/3, and it can often be enough to take players out because they weren't calculating for you having an instant speed pump that gives this much damage to them. And if you're not at that phase of the game and you're really hurting for cards, you could use this to draw cards. It being an instant means you can do this on your opponent's turn, so you don't have to discard due to hand size the turn you play this, which will give you more options on the following turn and hopefully lead to discarding less cards. Next up, we have a classic Overwhelming Stampede. This card has seen some reprints. It is down to $1.28. It's a sorcery for 3 green. Until end of turn, creatures you control gain trample and +X/+X, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So if your commander is decently sized, 4 power, 5 power or more, I would consider this card because you have access to your commander, and giving this that minimum floor with trample is gonna do a lot of damage. And green is well known for having big stompy creatures. You could even use maybe a vehicle that's got big enough power, bring it onto the battlefield, crew it, cast this, and get in a lot of damage. Next up, we have another favorite of mine, Beastmaster Ascension for $2.28. This enchantment costs 2 and a green and has whenever a creature you control attacks, you may put a quest counter on Beastmaster Ascension. As long as Beastmaster Ascension has 7 or more quest counters on it, creatures you control get +5/+5. So again, it's got the slight risk that if this gets removed during combat from an enchantment removal, then all that buff goes away and your creatures may have some unfavorable blocks coming. That is the risk. But the upside of +5/+5 is huge. Even without trample, a board that is pumped by that is going to just overwhelm opponents. Even your simple small little 2/2s all become 7/7s, and that's just going to be hard to chump block because when you have that many and they're that big, it's going to be real meaningful creatures that get blocked or they die because it's going to add up very fast. I like that you can, if you have 7 creatures on the battlefield that can attack, you can play this on your first main phase, and then attack, instantly get those 7 counters, and then they instantly get that pump. And if you wanted to, you could play it early and attack a few times to get those counters. But this is going to be seen as a pretty big threat, so I wouldn't use this and hope it stays around for multiple turns. If it does, great. But I would definitely play this in that overwhelming win con where you're trying to just get surprise damage in. Next up, we have Mirror Entity for 23 cents. Costs 2 and a white. Has changeling, so it's every creature type, so it literally will fit into every tribal deck or kindred deck. Its stats are 1/1 and has pay X until end of turn. Creatures you control have base power and toughness XX and gain all creature types. So this could be a way to get all your creatures that aren't in the tribal into the tribe. So that's interesting. But most people are going to play this for the win con, where you're increasing your creatures' power and toughness by XX. So you're able to do this at instant speed, so it makes opponents attacking you and you attacking opponents very tricky for them, because you control it. If you just leave up your mana, they don't know if they can get through on you, because if you have 6 or 8 mana untapped, they don't know if your board's going to be massive or not, if they're going to attack you. And if you're attacking, they're probably going to have to assume that you're going to pump your board. So they're going to be forced to make unsavory blocks, because if they don't, they're just going to die. You could, if you had enough mana, you could play Mirror Entity and pump it on the same turn, since it's not a tap ability. You're going to have less mana to pump your creatures, but if your board's wide enough and you have enough power, it could very well be worth it. And this goes well with +1/+1 counters, because it doesn't matter, like increasing their base power and toughness, and then the +1/+1 counters are above that. So this is extra good in +1/+1 counter decks. And that's 23 cents if I didn't say so. Next up and last, we have Scale Up. This is a 50-cent card. It's sorcery for 1 green mana. Until end of turn, target creature you control becomes a green worm with base power and toughness 6/4. Oh, I thought you said this would be a finisher. Well, it is, as Overload for green. You may cast a spell for its overload cost. If you do, change its text by replacing all instances of target with each. So this is going to be another card that doesn't have trample, but it's very easy to give your board trample in green. There's at least a dozen cards that say all your creatures have trample. So that is not hard. And even if you don't, if your board's wide enough, increasing their toughness and power to 6/4 stats, I mean, technically you could be decreasing it if you had something bigger than that, but having 6 power is a lot. So that is going to deal a lot of damage. And there's also ways to give your whole board unblockable. So that could be something to look into as well. 6 mana is pretty much where I view most win cons at. 6 mana or above typically. Some of the cards I listed are below that. And if you're playing a combo deck, then you kind of got to add multiple cards to it. So that's just a whole different story altogether. But the 6 mana is nothing to be concerned about. Again, if you have +1/+1 counters, that's going to go above this. So it'd be 7/5, 8/6, 9/7, so on and so forth, however many counters you have on there. So this is worth a shot. Give it a try. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.